was I wanted to aspire to do something different than what I was doing. And so it was about regret. So I told my mother, I was like, you know what, those were some lost years. I told my father this too, and my sister. And they were like, no, son, those are not lost years. Those years are making you what you are today.
The Phil Bach Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Phil Bach Podcast. I have been on a long hiatus, and it's good. It's good to be back. It is fun to be doing this again. I am in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm talking to Dr. Preston Cherry, who's in Wisconsin. I am very excited about this. Okay, Dr. Cherry is the founder and president of Concurrent Financial Planning. He's the director of personal financial planning at the Schwab Center of Wellness at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. He's published research in top journals. He's an Investopedia 100 top financial advisor, the 2022 Think Advisor Luminary finalist, wealthmanagement.com 10 to watch for 2023. Just an unbelievable resume and pedigree. Really, Dr. Cherry specializes in empowering individuals to share stories that inform their financial resources and life's design to achieve financial wellness and freedom that cultivates life wholeness. So, Dr. Cherry, thank you for coming on. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about family and couch moments, which is something I heard you coin on another podcast, which I'm stealing. We're going to talk about manifesting outcomes, and we're going to talk about financial planning and life money balance. So, Dr. Cherry, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Phil, appreciate you.
So when you have a chance to speak to one of the leading voices in the country on the topics of personal finance, behavioral finance, financial planning, you ask them about those topics, right? And I will. But I also want to ask about the journey that got you there. And for our listeners, just a little backstory here. So Preston and I recently met at a conference. We were introduced by the great Vance Barse. Shout out to Vance. And we had this amazing conversation about our respective belly of the whale moments, the moments that changed everything. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about family, about couch moments, manifesting outcome, all that. We'll talk about financial planning, but I do want to start with those moments. So again, Preston, thank you for coming on the podcast. And let me kind of kick it off here. Your work requires you to have uncomfortable conversations with people and families about the topic of money. And I've heard you credit your ability to understand your clients and to navigate those conversations. You've credited that back to your family and kitchen table conversations that you had growing up. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I appreciate the softball lob there, Phil, because it's so easy to talk about my family and what type of influence they had and still continue to have on me. These are what I like to call compoundable assets that were given. And there should be a level of gratitude to receive these compoundable assets before you even get to the money, or producing your talent in order to produce money. So before you get to any of that, or even the mention of passing on inheritances or money or the currency of it, we get to the other compoundable assets, which, like you said, I talk about a lot. What are those? Well, we're talking about my parents, 45 years of marriage. They instilled in us, Phil, very early about self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, self-value, these senses of self that help us as a whole human being. The more well we are, the better off that we'll be far as investing in ourselves and then having producing in life that contributes to our wealth. So they had a lot of conversations with us about building self, and then also talking about the money as well.
I'm pretty much a quant. I'm pretty much a numbers guy. Mostly, we're all, a little bit of different things, but mostly I'm a numbers guy. And I don't believe in a lot of, fluffy kind of things, but there are some things that I do believe in, and that, would probably surprise people that know me well. And one of those things is I think we are who we believe we are. And we can, you can almost consciously or intentionally, purposely rewire yourself about who you are and who you think you are. And I think back to my childhood, I had a few very tough years where I was getting into all kinds of trouble at school, and my self-worth was pretty low. I didn't really know. A lot of people didn't know what to make of me. I didn't really know what to make of myself. And my grandmother had this very special relationship with my grandmother, and she had this image of me. She was able to take all these negative self-images that I was having for being a troublemaker and being, having a disrespect of authority and getting in trouble in school. She was able to flip all that into a positive. And I just told this story online. I'll tell it right now, real quick. She told me about how her and her brother, when they were kids, were sitting in this park, and this fancy couple comes by and they sit right next to him. And the woman was saying, "Oh, I would love a Dachshund. I can't find a Dachshund anywhere. I'd pay anything if I can get a Dachshund." And her brother walks over to them and says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it over here. It just so happens I can get you a Dachshund. Now, it's not cheap. It's going to cost a lot of money, but I can get it." And the woman was ecstatic. She said, "Oh, thank you so much. Here's my contact information. Let me know." And he comes back to her. He comes back to his sister, my grandmother, and he says, "Okay, so what the hell is a Dachshund?" and she told me this story, and I still remember I don't know if it was true or not. She told it to me, but she told me this story to try to put this image, this self-image in me of, hey, it's okay if you're having trouble, being book smart, getting through school. Like, you can still be a success as, maybe you're a little bit of a wise guy. That's a positive, And I bring that up to you because, when you talk about these early conversations and the impact a family has, like, if I didn't have that self-image, I don't know if, not that I've been so successful, whatever success I had, I don't know if I would have achieved it without having had that self-image that she instilled in me.
Yes. Oh, that's spot on right there, because you're a little different than I was, Phil. But you know what? I'm different than what my sister is as well, and we're close. So my parents, they had to adapt to the both of us being different, but they wanted the same goal for us, which is to be yourself and use a sense of self to build further. So how does that relate to your story? Well, my sister, shout out Jennifer, don't hate me for telling this story, but she was a C student in high school, and I was an AB student. Okay, now my sister was creative, still is to this day. She has a business. She has a successful business off of creating items, fine goods, gifts, and everything, Phil. Well, my dad and my mother told me one time, they were like, "Preston, you got a C on your progress report, or even your report card." I didn't get too many. I said, "Well, Jen got a C, so why aren't you mad at her?" He goes, "Because that's her best. Your best is not a C. We're not judging you. We're not critiquing you on the grade. We're critiquing you on not fulfilling your best of what you can do." So two different things, right? Two different aspects, but we were coached differently according to what our strengths were, and still building up that sense of self.
It's incredible. And here we are decades later, and these things are so important to us and so important to who we eventually became. Now, I don't want to, kind of skip ahead a little bit, but, you're right now, what you're doing now, you've created a business for yourself of your own choosing, right? You are, like I said, you're one of the world's leading experts in financial planning and behavioral finance and personal finance. But you didn't, roll out of bed when you were 16 and say, "This is the path I'm going to do," right? You had a whole career first, and you intentionally chose to take this path. How did that come about?
Well, to your point earlier, Phil, is like in our childhood, my parents said, "Well, we want to give you access to things that we didn't have access to, like great school district." Okay. So they were intentional with moving us into a great school district in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, in order to say, use these resources. So access is very important when we're talking access, introduction to so awareness. So those type of aspects are very important. So, and we talked about, to go further with that, they said, "We want you all to do better with your finances as well." So we had these kitchen table talks, right? And they're not difficult; they're necessary. So I like to reframe the word difficult, even with conversations between couples or your household or whatever it is, society, they're necessary conversations, because when we have them, we're a little bit uncomfortable. Then we, more than likely, if you have them in a healthy manner, then the result is that people get to move on. So to button in your question is that when I got introduced to personal finance in my undergrad years in college by a mentor, it kind of clicked, because my mentor said, you know what, you kind of like this stuff, and I didn't even know financial planning was a thing or personal finances were a thing as a career. But the reason why it clicked, Phil, is because it seemed it was prevalent in our household. We had conversations. So when I learned it was a thing, then things started clicking.
When you talk about a couch moment, is that what a couch moment is? Is it having those, conversations in an open and honest way, or is it something else?
Absolutely. It is having those, I call them moments too. But having conversations, communicating, Phil, communicating with either your significant other, family member, friend, yourself, doing a self audit. So when we're talking about those couch moments, it is passing on wisdom and knowledge imparting wisdom and knowledge into individuals, so they can then take that knowledge and then invest in themselves. So yes, when we had money talks at home, we were sat down and said, this is going to be a little rough patch, whether it be a layoff or something that's going on in the external neighborhood, like the inflation or whatever it may be. They said, we're going to have a little rough patch here. How do you feel about it? This is what to expect. This is how long it's probably going to last. We're going to make a little adjustments, and then we'll be better on the back end. So yes, those conversations and communication is very important, because that's the information we need in order to move forward with our life and money aspirations.
Talk about passing on wisdom and knowledge. Tell me about your grandparents and the idea of oral histories and oral history stories, what that was in your family and what that meant to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because, my grandfather has since passed. My grandmother's still alive. I get oral histories from my mother and father. And later on in life, I'm 44 now. We got introductions of history along as young adults up until now. But it's fascinating to hear some oral histories that I've never heard before. Sometimes my grandmother will tell a story, and I'm like, I didn't know that. Or my dad will tell a story about my grandfather or my great grandfather, or the relationships during that generation, and explaining how my grandfather and his brothers, how they helped each other to survive socially and economically with wisdom passed down. Right. Or my grandmother would say, this is how education helped us. Or when we used to go back to the country in Louisiana and tend to the graveyard sites, old school, my grandmother took every opportunity to tell her story. So what does that mean to an individual? Those are more ingredients that are placed in us, at least it did for me, to become a whole person. And the more that you're a whole person, the closer you get to that. We'll never be perfect, but it's progress. But the more inputs we have inside of ourselves, then the more healthy we are, because we have identity. Phil, we have identity, and oral history is about identity and growing as an individual, so you can do better in life.
I love that. And when you look over your career, you weren't always working for yourself. You didn't always have self-agency, right? And early in your career, I know you worked as a mutual fund wholesaler. And, there's a great Taleb quote where he says, like, the most addictive things in the world, I think it's like drugs, carbohydrates, and a monthly salary. I forgot exactly. I probably butchered it. But, once you're in that system, right, and you have your own lifestyle to support, it is so difficult to break out of it, right? To say, all right, you know what? I want to do something else. I want to do something purposeful. I want to have my own agency. I want to, be an entrepreneur or, do financial planning the way I want to do it. It's not easy to break out of a career, right? And very few can, but you were able to. So, how did that come about? How were you able to?
Well, yes. And you know what? I just tweeted about this a few weeks ago, which is there is nothing wrong with working in a good culture in a what you call a W-2 or having a career at a firm. Matter of fact, for most people, that is going to be the path, and that's across the board. All right, because entrepreneurship, as you know, Phil, it's no joke, right? You have to. As a matter of fact, there's studies that come out all the time about the mental health of entrepreneurs because it's so stressful, and there's a lot of fail rate too at the beginning. I mean, so I know we tend to just elevate, ownership and entrepreneurship as it's the solution for everything. I like to dial that back just a little bit, encourage entrepreneurship, but also just encourage well-being in what you do, because you can have purpose with the firm if they have a good culture and they're empowering you and all that. Then yes, being a team member of a firm can be just as purposeful as having a entrepreneur business. I have both right now, being working at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, and I have a practice. So talking about the journey, I learned a lot through my journey, Phil, from a career. I didn't just jump in. You had to work on your craft. I appreciated people that gave me the time to partner at their firm, be a team member of their firm, and invest in my growth as I gave back to the firm. So it's more about culture. It's like, are these institutions helping you advance your human condition? That's the key. Now, if once you get a lot of expertise in what you do, because those stories of entrepreneurship tend to skip over this part, because very rarely do people just jump into business without an improved skill set or even have those traits that make a good entrepreneur. So
history is written by the winners, right? You don't see the fireside chat of the entrepreneurs that did not succeed.
That's right. Yes, exactly. So, to come back and button in your question and that was a journey. And I said, you know what? Now, this was back in 2016 when I pursued the PhD, and I also said I was going to open up my own firm or practice. I was like, you know what? It's a matter of extending the opportunity, and that was what it was about. It really wasn't about working for a firm or not. It was about, okay, what's next? I've done this. What is next, and how can I continue to elevate myself and push myself an opportunity to make the greatest impact?
Yeah. And do you feel like this is the path, like this was of, all the different paths, all the infinite paths that your career could have taken? Like this is, I'd say, is this the path that you selected for yourself, or was it, circumstance? You happened to find the right people at the right time, read the right book, get the right idea, things just kind of worked into this way? Or was this a purposeful path that you selected for yourself?
Oh, great question. So actually, life is full, and my mother likes to put it, is full of seasons. And there's reasons, as you said, reasons for season. That's where I got that from. I use it a lot, and I always shout out to my mother for saying about seasons there. And I made it a little further. There's reasons for seasons. So there's seasons, and there's actually, you can equate that to life stages. Okay. And then also too, there's something I like to impart, which is the 4 T's, which is trial, triumph, transition, and transformation. Okay. And life is full of ebb and flows. So what was that moment for me? Well, there was a period of, say, 7 years from like 28 to like 35 to where I call it the fog years. I wasn't doing very well internally. And so I had to address that, some ailments. And I was like, you know what? If I continue on this destructive path or a pathway to nowhere, then I'm not going to be able to actualize what I was given and what I worked hard for. And when I say given, I'm talking about those human inputs that came in from my folks and all that. And then also my hard work. If I continue to destroy that internally, then I'm not going to do my best optimally as far as my opportunity set. So that event for me, the season, was I wanted to aspire to do something different than what I was doing. And so it was about regret. So I told my mother, I was like, you know what, those were some lost years. I told my father this too, and my sister. And they were like, no, son, those are not lost years. Those years are making you what you are today. All right. They're making you what you are today. So that was a season. And now I'm in my next season, and we're talking about transition and transformation. It's like, okay, I said, I identified what I don't want to do anymore, so I can identify what I do want to do. And then that was about aspiration, Phil. And then I was more healthy. I was more clear. I was more focused and intentional. And I said, okay, let's roll with this after this period of fog.
Without that support and without those families and without the great advice and that self-image that was instilled in you early, do you think that, was it a guarantee? Was it a certainty that you would have pulled yourself out of that winter as the season changed? Or, do you think if you didn't have that support, things might have gone a different way?
Yeah, they would have gone a different way. There's no question. Yeah, I mean, it was guaranteed. It's kind of like if you fail to plan, that's a guarantee. Planning doesn't guarantee that and we talk about financial planning and you're just planning in life planning. It doesn't guarantee that you will achieve your highest height. Doesn't guarantee that, but it sure increases the probabilities and possibilities, by planning. Okay, because doing nothing is a guarantee. And had I not had those inputs, this is why I live in a constant state of gratitude and thankfulness to what was instilled in me and that I got to build off of, because, it works as well. You got to work hard too. However, I always acknowledge hard work that's just not it. People's like, oh, all you got to do is work hard and that's it. No. Yes, you have to work hard, but you have to have these inputs. If I did not have those inputs that you were talking about, that fundamental base, no, that transition, that trial, and then the transition period to triumph and having a triumph, it would not have happened. Guaranteed.
What was the moment that you could see the triumph at the end of the tunnel, that you knew you were going to make it? Not the moment of triumph, but the moment that you knew, okay, this is going to be okay. This is going to work. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to make it. Was there like a moment that you knew that you felt it?
Yes. So I had an aha moment. I'll never forget it. And this is why I wanted to impart this feeling of transformation, of aha, or aha moment to folks, because what I experienced, I want everybody else to have that same experience. And it was an aha moment. When I keep saying what do I? It's 3 A's. All right. Admit where you are. Acknowledge how you feel about it. Process. And then so you can take some action. Okay. And that requires a healthy, what I call a HSA, which is an honest self-audit. And that is that A process: admit, acknowledge, and then take action. And once I did the work with support to move on, and I had to admit where I was, and then process the emotion that, the guilt, the shame, the regret, to go ahead and move forward. I had to acknowledge my feelings about that. It processed those two. Doesn't happen overnight. Then now it's a more healthy sense of self, so you can take some action. And yes, that happened to me in 2016. I got laid off from a job because the job actually was shrinking the workforce. And I actually wanted a little bit more, I said responsibilities and all this. And I said, if this doesn't change in the next year, then I may leave. Well, they were like, well, let me help you out with that. Right. But that was a gift. That was a moment. And I was like, okay. And actually the firm that I was with, we're still good friends and all that. But at that moment, I was like, okay, what is it that I want to do? And I wrote it down: PhD, open up a practice, more impact on the world, maximize myself in these areas. And it was very clear, and I'm doing it right now.
You wrote it down?
I did write it down.
Do you still have that piece of paper?
I do. Matter of fact, I have an envelope that I usually have right at my disposal. Dang, I don't have it right now, but so I have it. Yeah, it's really somewhere around here, but oh man. But anyway, it's right here. I do have the envelope. I wrote myself a letter, several letters actually, And it reminded me to be a continuous reminder, not out of regret, but to reflect on what I made it through and what I wanted to do going forward. So if I have a disconnect, and this is where concurrent came from, the name concurrent from with the firm, is that your life and your money have to work concurrently, which is together, in order to achieve your life's design and go in the direction that you want to go into. When that letter that envelope that I'm talking about, it reminds me to reflect, and remind myself of the feeling of life and money going in opposite directions, because that felt like, you know what, so when I remind myself of that and reflect, I may be getting off path, then I say, this is why you're here, not out of regret, but to reflect.
I love that. I wrote down a couple of things about 2 years ago. They're sitting on my desk. They're both going to take a while to achieve, but I was at a point of crossroads myself. I had this was right around the end of my first startup, Exponential ETFs. We had some successes, some didn't. I had a couple of funds that we launched that were my great ideas that nobody gave a damn about, and nobody invested in. But we did this other thing. We did this sub-advisor business that we were able to sell to another firm, and I'd say it was maybe a single, certainly not a home run of a startup, and it left me feeling very unsatisfied, very, very like I have unfinished business, which I still very much to this day feel. And, there were opportunities to go back into the zoo, right? To go back to, work for a bigger company or to try again. And, at the time it was, COVID was just starting, and it was really, really tough to get something off the ground, to get some financing. And it's like, oh, it'd be so easy just to, basically give up on my dreams and take, not to, let's not shed a tear. I mean, I was very fortunate to have the options that I had. I'm not, it's not a sob story, but still it was, not the life that I had very intentionally tried to build for myself over the, previous 5 years. And I wrote down in my office, I still have it here, actually my other office in Detroit, but really two things. One is I will be healthy on my 80th birthday, and I will be the CEO or the majority owner of a cash flow positive company.
Okay.
Even positive by $1, I don't care, but a company that makes more money than it costs. And those are those are currently my two goals in life. We'll see. Let's check back in. I got about 40 years to hit 80. So
yeah. Hey, a long life is what we aspire to have, and long, fruitful life. And by the way, the $1, that's significant, because that is the bet on Price is Right. They always get it wrong and say, I bet $1.
That's right. That's right. All right. We got to talk a little financial planning. Life money balance is your ethos, is your philosophy. And you developed really your own. I mean, we already talked about the A's. We talked about, the trial, triumph, and
transition. Yep. Transformation. Mm-hmm. Yep. Trial, triumph, transformation, and transition.
Okay, there you go. So you have developed your own philosophy, right? And it touches on, of course, behavioral finance. Also touches on empathy and storytelling. I mean, how did you just sit down in the lab and figure these things out? Were they developed and refined over time? Like, how do you get to the point where you have your own vision, your own ethos, your own philosophy that you've developed around financial planning?
Great question. So I sat down, and the stories and questions you've been asking, or stories I've been sharing, and the questions that you've been asking have all been inputs into the philosophy. It's these nuggets of wisdom, these gems from my supporting cast around me, mentors, life, my parents, my sister, my niece, my brother, who my sister is married to, all of these special events and moments, even the trial part, fed into the philosophy of concurrent and what life money balance is. Let your life lead your money, not your money lead your life. And when we talk about writing some aspirations down, that's what they are, aspirations. And you wrote yours down, I wrote mine down, and those are what you aspire to do. So that's what let your life lead your money. Let's dig into, let's explore your value system, your attitudes, your experiences, your cultures, all of that goes into figuring out what you do want to do, what you don't want to do. And you want to go into doing what you want to do. That means then that's what we're talking about, your life aspirations. Your life and money are working concurrently to create your life's design. And I actually got as far as interested in, financial psychology, the psychology of money is another way of saying it, or this human-centered approach, okay, is some of the stuff that I learned from my mother innately, because she has compassion, okay? She has the empathy. She has the listening capabilities, this, that, and the other. And my father has the brain and and my mother has a brain too. But I don't. But that was his strength. His strength is people. So to answer your question, those were innate things. Then I started getting introduced to the theories. All right, financial therapy, financial psychology, going through the PhD system, learning all of these influential people that have been working on this for years. And then I started contributing my own work, my own thoughts. But the whole life planning and positive psychology and financial psychology, money scripts and this and that. So it was there's a whole theory and philosophy system. So I took what I had in me innately, started studying it, started practicing it, because I practiced it over time naturally, and then and married it up with the information that's out there. And then that's what you see now.
Yes, it's awesome. It's fascinating. Let me ask you one very personal financial planning question. But let's just say theoretically, there was someone who was a serial entrepreneur with mediocre success over an extended time frame, and so I'll just say, okay, so here's my situation, right? So I've had some success, I've had some failures, right? At the end of the day, looking back over the last 7 years since I've gone down the entrepreneurial path, probably has not been a wise financial outcome. I think it'll pay off in the future, but to date, probably has not been. Not necessarily a bad decision, right? I mean, there's so much luck involved, but not a great outcome. And let's just say I have a significant other who grew up in, very different very poor circumstances, and is very stressed out about money and wants to save money. And it's, how much are you making today, this month? I don't want to hear about equity and, promises about the future and all that. What's in the bank account today, which in my case is nothing. So, there's a lot of tension there, because you have two people who are trying to marry their finances, who have completely different ways of thinking about money and all that. So what's a good strategy for how we can bridge our views?
Yes. Look, thank you for sharing, because that's vulnerability, and people want trusted environments, Phil. In order to do what you just did, is people are waiting to be asked so they can share their story, by the way. So it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. So I appreciate you sharing. And the framework, communication is key. But what you mentioned there is two different perspectives. So you're a team now, because you have a household culture that you both of you want to participate in and be healthy, and then have your own household aspirations as a team, and you need each other. So, but then there's a culture of that household, because the household is a system. It is a system. It is a system. It's a human and financial system. Okay. Now you have two perspectives coming together. So how do you create a good environment to where you all can proceed with that and proceed and achieve that household aspirational system, right? Well, you have to hear each other out. So here's the framework. And some folks say, they share with me often, is we don't talk about it because it's going to end up like this. So it's either do nothing, or when there is a conversation, there's no progress made, because it's the anticipation of, oh, damn, here we go again with this, with this or that. So step one is to state out loud for the both of you and say, this is our aspiration. This is our goal. This is what we'd like to do, which is to feel more comfortable, certain, have more control and flexibility over our life and finances. And in this particular area, this is what our goal is to have whatever your number is, in 10 years or 15 years. We want to be more flexibility and freedom in 10 years, and this is our number. So agree. That way you have a agreeing point. Number two, then you say, okay, Phil, you go first. And how do you suggest that we get here? And what is your perspective on why? And then I'll share, that's person B, or the next person will say, here is my approach, and here's my perspective on why. And then you come together to combine, not necessarily, what do you call, some people say you have to give up something to get something, well, if you combine the thought, then it's more about combination of our two perspectives to get to our goal, rather than someone having to give up some of themselves in order to get the goal. So those are the 4 steps.
I love it. That's great. That's great. All right. Well, this is, like I said, this is the first time I've done this in a while. My old podcast listeners, if they're still around after a couple of years, will remember I would always ask a closing question based off The Obstacle is the Way, which is based off the Ryan Holiday book, but of course from Marcus Aurelius before him. But I'm retiring that one. I think it's time for a new closing question. And I'm going to be asking this now of all my guests going forward. Tell me about a mentor that you've had and something that they did for you that allowed you to get where you are today.
Ooh, a lot of mentors. I encourage mentors. I'm a mentor to many, and we never stop having mentors. So one of my mentors shared with me, and this was one when I was at college at Prairie View University. When I graduated undergrad, my dad said famously, he said, "Wow, son, you made it, and congratulations for finishing school." And my mentor was sitting right there. He said, "No, Mr. Cherry, Preston's got a long way to go." And my dad said, "Well, I'm done. That's your job now." He said they've done their job, right? So he put him in a good position for me to have a mentor. So the mentor shared with me awareness and introduction to my next stage. And he was telling me that, just because that you have a pathway assigned to you and you have it maybe written down, be open to suggestion, be open to suggestion and consider, a different path that you may not have thought of. So if I would have stuck to what I was doing, which I did, I tried it for a couple of years, and then I ended up going to grad school in 2006 in financial planning. And had I not had this open mind of suggestion during that time, then I would have passed up an opportunity twice, not once, but twice. So being that was a key, because it kicked off a lot of things for me by being open and giving up some of the control.
I love that. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to leave it. Dr. Cherry, thank you for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. Where can people learn more about working with you? Where can they read everything you're working on and follow you?
I appreciate it. So all over social media at the handle at Dr. Preston Cherry. So it's Dr. Preston Cherry. And then also Life Money Balance concurrentfp.com is the company. And then the Life Money Balance podcast is on your social platforms and also YouTube.
Thanks again for coming on. Congrats on all your success. Thank you to the audience for your time and attention. And it's good to be back. So Phil Bach Podcast is back up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Phil Bach Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to drop a review. This show was published for entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice. Please contact a licensed professional before making any investments. Some of the securities discussed on the show may be owned by its participants. Opinions expressed on the show may not reflect those of their employers. Stay hungry and stay foolish.